We acknowledge the lives lost to suicide and recognise those who have survived suicide attempts and those who struggle today or in the past with thoughts of suicide, mental health issues, and crisis situations. We acknowledge all those who have felt the deep impact of suicide, including those who love, care, and support people experiencing suicidality and those experiencing the pain and bereavement through suicide. We respect collaboration with people who have a lived or living experience of suicide and mental health issues and value their contribution to the work we do.
I can't let them win. If I go, then they've won. I've got to be stronger. I've got to fight for me, but also going forward. And that was part of my personal growth.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope, a series that shares the stories of everyday Australians that have experienced moments in crisis and found a path to support. Whilst all of the stories shared offer hope and inspiration, at times you may hear something you find triggering. If you or someone you know needs crisis support, please phone Lifeline on 13 11 14, text 0477 13 11 14, or visit lifeline.org.au for Lifeline chat service, which is 24/7.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope. On today's episode, we are joined by Paul. Paul is a resilient soul who embarked on a profound transformation after 4 decades of living behind a facade of existences. Around 14 years ago, Paul's world collapsed, becoming the genesis of an ongoing journey of personal evolution. Despite battling a myriad of mental health and physical disabilities, including surviving a heart attack and grappling with recurring cardio issues, stroke, multiple bouts of cancer, functional neurological disorder, and numerous other health conditions, Paul's determination to embrace life's trials and tribulations remains unyielding. Well, hi, Paul. Thank you so much for joining me. I'd like to invite you to share whatever you're comfortable in doing so about your journey.
Firstly, thank you for having me on today. So much of my life has been spent around wanting to be understood. Firstly by myself, and secondly by others out there, and that's to sidestep the stigma, the shame, the guilt, discrimination that has always followed me like a dark cloud. And that's just part of my ongoing battles with my many mental illnesses and physical health and disabilities. I had an early childhood which was ideal, living in the city, then the bush. Was sent to boarding school where I endured three years of intense childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse and emotional abuse. From there, I sort of moved into self-denial for 30, 40 odd years before I became the victim, before I became the survivor, the survivor, and before I became the thriver. I was married for 23 years, which left me the richest men in the world because I have 4 amazing sons who are my rock and foundation, and a life that has given me incredible memories. As I said, I was living in self-denial. I was living behind a facade to the point where around 2008 my mental and physical well-being basically collapsed. My marriage was gone. I endured extreme loneliness that followed multiple suicide attempts in and out of mental health wards. Previously, addicted to hard drugs and excessive use of alcohol, ridiculous, risky behaviour, which I now understand was just a consequence of my borderline personality, bipolar and dissociative identity disorder and major depressive disorder and all those things. To the point where in 2008, I went from the penthouse to the outhouse, where I was literally living on the streets of Brisbane. I was battling with a heart attack, had a stroke about 10 years ago, still have an aneurysm, still have cardio problems, endured cancer 4 times, 3 different types of cancer, perforated bowel. I lost most of my bowel, died twice on the operating table, and had to put me in a medically induced coma. And I could go on with all the physical attributes. So it's a life that is incredibly rich, incredibly full, incredibly complex. But I've somehow managed to stay here.
What were the pivotal moments that made you realise the need for change?
Probably around about 2008. As I think I said, when my life was beginning to crumble on all fronts, living on the streets was when I actually had to acknowledge my past. that I was a victim of horrendous and ongoing sexual, physical and emotional abuse. I often use the quote, I'd reached a point where I could no longer outrun the demons in my rear vision mirror. So it was fine for me to sort of stop and say, enough is enough. It was a huge moment. I endured about six to eight suicide attempts, in and out of mental wards, shock treatment, which led to, I believe, the stroke that I had, and now suffering with epilepsy and functional neurological disorder because of the damage that it did. That allowed me to really focus and say, I don't want to be here. Why? Because I don't really feel I belong anymore. And it was probably around about my 12th suicide attempt where I'd been going through a process of reflection and just questioning who I am, why I am. I used to often say, would the real Paul Klotz please stand up, because I had no idea who he was. And I was just starting to take on board who these different personalities were. And the more I researched about childhood abuse, I then started to learn about complex trauma, and I started to learn about the mental illnesses that flow from that, and then the associated physical health complaints that one gets. But it wasn't until probably about 2015, it was my 12th suicide attempt, and I woke up after a couple of days in the mental health ward at Bundaberg Base, and looked around the room and went, damn, I'm still here. It obviously, if it wasn't my time to go, then I needed to find a reason for being here, a purpose, that was important to me. And not just simply appeasing others, which unfortunately I'd been doing all of my life.
Paul, throughout your journey, what skills or coping mechanisms did you develop that significantly aided your progress?
One of the mental health support workers introduced me to a company in Bundaberg. It was an employment agency. I worked with a wonderful person called Jo there, who believed in me. She saw something in me that I couldn't see. She encouraged me to run a couple of workshops that they had for long-term unemployed, disengaged youth and people with disabilities. I wrote and developed another 12 different workshops on soft and hard skills, from understanding your personality, understanding what self-esteem, self-confidence is. Volunteered, gave my time, but was helping other people. And that's when it all sort of dawned on me, is that, I've got this incredible commercial acumen of, as I said, having spent so many years in senior executive roles in the IT and telco world. The feedback I was getting from people was, I've got to thank you, Paul. I've got more out of your 3-hour workshop than I got out of 3 years of working with a psychologist. And I went, wow, that's a pretty outlandish statement. That's when it really dawned. That was one of the key pivotal moments where I said, okay, this is obviously my purpose. It's to help other people. And I can do that in 2 ways. I can do it on a one-to-one, or I can do it as part of sort of committees out there. So that set me on my path of self-discovery. It was also very cathartic for me as well. It was part of my ability to reevaluate myself, to reinforce what I was doing, why I was doing it. So one of the other key tools that I use, some of the skills, the coping mechanisms, I have what I call my oh shit box. And so when I'm really dark, when I'm struggling out there, I just have this big box which has a little bucket of sand in it with some shells, etc. So I use the 6 senses that we have. So the bucket of sand, I can put my hand in there and I can feel like I'm back at the beach. I can play with the shells, so the feeling, the sensation, the smell. I have a bag of mush sticks. So again, the smell, the taste, the feel takes me back to my childhood. I have a couple of favourite CDs in there that just bring me to tears, but bring me to joy. So I have a little plants of lavender and a few things like that. So I use the 6 senses to just distract, stop the negative thoughts, stop the blackness, the darkness, the clouds, which allows me to move forward.
How did you overcome the fear or uncertainty that often accompanies taking the first step towards personal growth and healing?
One of the dominant themes that kept me going to overcome that fear and that uncertainty was, don't let the bastards win. So when I say that, I mean the Christian brothers, the the three, four of them that had, taken away my childhood and had ruled my childhood were also, I came to the conclusion, were ruling my older life. As I moved into manhood. So it was about saying, you've ruled and you've ruined my life to this point. I'm not going to let the bastards win anymore. So that was one of the little mantras that I used to just, which I still do when I get into dark places, was, I can't let them win. If I go, then they've won. I've got to be stronger. I've got to fight for me, but also going forward. And that was part of my personal growth. The healing side of it, so what I tend to focus on more is my own personal growth through the transformation, how I'm transforming myself, how I'm trying to identify who the real Paul Klotz is so that he can stand up to be strong. For me, that's important. That's part of my journey. It's part of me being real. And not just succumbing. It's not just appeasing to what society says. So part of it was just to accept what had happened. It's part of that reflective process. It's a part of that awareness process. It's part of that acknowledgement. So I had to accept, and it was a difficult thing to say those words. And if we were having this conversation 4 or 5 years ago, for me to say I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse, I'd be in tears. I would just be an absolute mess because it was so raw. It was so rich. It was so ugly for me to comprehend. But I had to put a sunset clause that when you face your demons, you've got to put a sunset clause that you need to be the victim. You need to grieve. You need to cry. You need to be in pain. But you also need to say, I now need to move forward.
We hope you're enjoying this episode. Lifeline's new support toolkit makes it easier to care for family, friends, and loved ones, and look after yourself along the way. Visit us at toolkit.lifeline.org.au. Now, back to the episode.
Were there any obstacles or setbacks you encountered whilst trying to maintain these habits, and how did you overcome them?
Quite a few in all sorts of different formats, big, small, and everywhere in between. And I'll just randomly start anyway. The justice system. In my darkest hours, going through the divorce proceedings, the marriage breakup, the divorce proceedings, and the impact it had on the relationship with my kids, the Supreme Court action I had against the Catholic Church. There was, and there still really isn't, a great deal of support in place for males, but I would say, generally speaking, for anyone out there, that really made it hard. So for me, it was about, again, having to educate myself, and finding the strength to reach out to people, which is not easy to do when you've been so self-reliant and so hidden behind your facade for so long, that you need to, again, that safe person to be able to reach out and say, look, I'm struggling there. Part of it is, making yourself aware of what services are out there. What have I done? Well, I've got involved to raise these things, to bring the awareness. I'm trying to educate the departments and the governments to say you need to take that holistic approach to prevent further problems, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. NDIS has been an absolute lifesaver for me. It's allowed me to do the things that I can do. NDIS supports me so I can support other people, so I can be on these committees, so I can hopefully bring about sustainable change out there. So for me, it's a big thing. And I spent so much time sitting on the sidelines, getting angry, frustrated, hiding, that, again, part of the positive self-talk was, it was time to get in the game. I needed to get into the game to bring about these changes, to use all of that lived and living experience. When we talk about challenges and what we do, the point is not, and never will be, to stop the pain, to stop this, to stop that. That's like trying to say you got to change, you got to stop the ocean tides. The point is, I need to learn to swim. I need to learn a better way to swim. And so that's what I've tried to do, is saying, how do I adapt who I am and the skills that I've got, looking at the different personalities and the key strengths, rather than looking at the negative aspects of all those different personalities, garnering all of the strengths of each of those so that I do have the strength to do what I'm doing now.
Paul, what advice would you offer to individuals or communities seeking to break the stigma and foster open discussions on these critical issues?
Suicide, its prevention and all the other associated factors that sit around it is not solely the responsibility of that individual. Yes, they own it, but if we've learned anything, we can't do it alone. So from a community perspective, we all need to be responsible. We all need to be accountable. We all have skin in the game. And by that, I mean, we need to, there's lots of campaigns out there, called, Are You OK Day, which is great. We all do that for that one day, but we need to be doing that every day. So we need to turn on the radar, in our own heads and, be a little bit more observant, be a little bit more aware, listen, but really listen to what's being said. And probably more importantly, listen to what's not being said. Normal conversations that we have, and it's not about laying blame, but people do go through that grieving process. It's about saying, okay, so what do we change? We change how we interact with each other. Life has become so busy and so cold in a lot of ways that we're all so busy just trying to keep our heads above the poverty line. But we need to just really keep our eyes open, listen to what people are saying and not saying, watch for changes. Helping one person may not change the world, but it may actually change the world of that person. So it's really important that we do those things. Think about how you speak and how you act. How would you feel if someone said or did that to you? I'd feel bloody terrible. Okay, so why is it okay for you to do that to someone else? So getting us to think about it and then taking that one step further and saying, okay, you wouldn't like someone doing that to you, so you really don't want to do that to someone else. Why is it okay to do it to yourself? So it's really getting into that negative self-talk. So, but that's a little longer process to get there. But communities, just the way we interact with people. For individuals, safe place, safe person. Research, acknowledge, confront yourself, have those hard conversations with yourself earlier so that you don't, not waste, but lose as much time as we have.
Are there any specific support systems or resources you would recommend to others facing similar challenges?
Everyone's journey is their own journey, so it's going to be it is going to be individual. So I can only speak for myself, but the generic one is, as I keep saying it, but it's just so important. Safe place, safe person. We've got to have that. Remember that they need to be, non-judgmental. It's someone that's going to listen to you, not give advice. Look for your local community groups where males can go and talk, but look for community groups where any gender can go along to and just feel safe and be able to talk. And most communities have a suicide prevention group. Get involved with that. It's amazing how cathartic it can be that you can talk and work with fellow members of your community to raise awareness, education, fight for better resources. You're doing something for other people, but you're also doing something for yourself because you're confronting your demons, you're battling your demons and saying, I'm not going to let the bastards win. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to, whatever that conversation is. There's some simple things. There's something that I developed when I was living on the streets, and I call it my model of contentment and also my dashboard. And so I was contemplating, why am I here? What's the purpose? Blah, blah. And so I have the 6 pillars of contentment: mental state, my emotional state, physical state, social state, spiritual state, and financial state. And the model looks like a stock exchange when I use, but also in my head, I look at where the levels are of each of those. And when I reflected back that, when I was at my darkest moment and ready to end and to take my life, I was bankrupt across all of those. I had nothing left. But I then started to explain and explore what they meant for me. That's been a very useful tool for me. Again, it's retraining the brain, but it's also reinforcing why you're here. It's also helping you figure out where you're at, why you're at, looking for those danger signs. They're just some of the things that I've used over time to try and, keep myself here, keep myself focused on my purpose, keep myself strong enough that I can not only just talk for myself, but talk for others that don't have the capacity, don't have the strength.
Is there anything else you would like to add as a part of this podcast?
Really just for people to focus on one step at a time, one day at a time. When we're confronted with, whatever is, an ugly event in our lives, it does and will be and feel totally overwhelming to us. Just take a breath, step back, one step. Can't eat an elephant in one bite. Take lots of little bites. It's about getting that self-awareness. It's about controlling that self-talk. But just remember that one step at a time, one day at a time. Remember, it's okay not to be okay. We've got to stop beating ourselves up. I'm not the best father. I'm not the best provider. I'm out of work. I've got a drinking problem. I've got a gambling problem. I've got this. I've got that. That's okay. Until you acknowledge what's happening, nothing's ever going to change. So it's okay not to be okay. But that sunset clause comes in. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to try and think you can outrun the demons in your rear vision mirror? You can't. At some point, they will come calling. So it's okay not to be okay, but as long as you are prepared to confront it and reach out, find that safe person, that safe place, and just be kind to yourselves. We're not perfect. None of us are.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing your story and being part of the Holding On to Hope podcast. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing what's in store for you next.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to Holding On to Hope, the podcast. Lifeline is grateful to all Holding On to Hope participants for choosing to share their personal lived experiences openly and courageously in order to offer hope and inspiration to others. Your act of kindness makes for a better world. And remember, you don't have to struggle alone. Visit toolkit.lifeline.org.au today.